Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the CommanDorks. I'm Tarren.
And I'm Beef, and we're back with a holiday deck tech video.
Yes, these decks are the gifts that keep on giving to themselves because they're both greedy, degenerate treasure decks that want to swim in a pool of opponents' tears. I'll be discussing my Korvold Fae-Cursed King deck, Korvold's dirty, decadent, no-good, greedy, rotten, low-life, bootlegging, Gnaw-Boning dragon horde. Hallelujah, where's the Tylenol?
I'll be showcasing my Negan, the cold-blooded deck, Negan, tough but fair. What better time than Christmas to bring out our disgusting treasure decks, because sometimes holiday consumerism brings out the worst in people. And Negan is the Scrooge to Korvold's Grinch.
Flood the board with treasure tokens, fa la 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 la, my life. If you enjoy what you see here, be sure to like the video and subscribe because we hope you'll be back for future dorky fun. But now with all that out of the way, let's start unwrapping these gifts. Treasures, treasures, treasures. That's what this deck is about. Just making lots and lots of treasure tokens and playing Korvold so he can watch them get sacrificed and add card draw on top of the mana. It's disgusting in just about every way imaginable, and I don't even know what to say about it as far as an intro is concerned. So, other than it makes opponents want to run away from me.
Hey! I'm not afraid anymore! I said I'm not afraid anymore! Do you hear me? I'm not afraid anymore!
Alright, let's talk about the commander, Korvold Fae-Cursed King. So he is a Jund commander. He's 2 black, red, green, 4/4 dragon noble. He has flying and says whenever Korvold Fae-Cursed King enters the battlefield or attacks, sacrifice another permanent. And then the bigger portion is whenever you sacrifice a permanent, put a +1/+1 counter on Korvold and draw a card. Yikes. This is very much a full-on treasure deck with a dragon sub-theme. Currently runs 9 dragons if you count Korvold, or 10 if you count the Smaug token from there and back again. The main goal here is just to flood the board with treasure tokens, get as many as possible, and get Korvold into play for some absurd card draw and ramp that, well, hopefully leads me into one of my many win strategies. Let's get into those, shall we? Key pieces. About 12 or so of these that I've pointed out. So most of these will try to capitalize on my treasure strategy in some fashion or another. So kind of the big obvious one is Korvold, with all of the sacrifice triggers, can make himself pretty big over time. So, I mean, he can get into one-hit KO range pretty quickly. So that is definitely a viable option on the field. But others I've broken out into sort of their own category where we have burn and drain, outvaluing my opponents where they can't catch up anymore, or just cards that are a big finisher or say I win. So the burn strategy or drain strategy, so we have Descent into Avernus, Reckless Fireweaver, Nadir's Nightblade, Mirkwood Bats, and Mayhem Devil. So Descent into Avernus, while, does hurt myself over time, the hope is I end up benefiting from the treasures more than my opponents and try to burn them faster with my other burn pieces alongside. And, the other thing is, if I'm in a dangerous spot, Korvold, he can let me sack any permanent, so I can get rid of it if it's working against me. So, Reckless Fireweaver, just 1 damage to each opponent whenever an artifact enters the battlefield under my control. So just really potent with Descent into Avernus or things like Academy Manufacturer or any token doubler. Nadir's Nightblade, similar, except it's when token leaves the battlefield. So it says each opponent will lose 1 life and I will gain 1 life whenever a token I control leaves the battlefield. So another thing that pairs really well with Descent into Avernus because I'm guaranteed to be gaining at least half of my life back that I'm losing from Descent. Mirkwood Bats is kind of a fusion of Reckless Fireweaver with Nadir's Nightblade, where whenever I create or sacrifice, each opponent is going to lose a life. It's also a flying blocker, another thing that's pretty potent with Descent into Avernus or Academy Manufactor. Really surprised this card was a common. You would think it'd be at least uncommon with, how crazy that can be. And Mayhem Devil, which is just going to ping any target for 1 damage whenever any player is going to sacrifice a permanent. So good removal piece, but also good to feed into the burn strategy. Okay, so outvalue pieces that just help me just skyrocket and go off to the races. So biggest one is probably Doubling Season, but I've also got its good old pal Parallel Lives. And then we've got, like I've mentioned before, Academy Manufactor, Jolene the Plunder Queen, Zorn, Reaver Cleaver, and your old pal, Old Gnawbone. These are things that are just going to get me a boatload of treasures. Jolene is one of my favorite cards because she's like a political Zorn in a way. And Reaver Cleaver is just what if Old Gnawbone were an equipment? And then Old Gnawbone, kind of the running joke in our play group is when seeing the card is, when is Wizards going to finally give green something good? But yeah, creating treasures equal to any combat damage dealt is just busted. I don't know why I don't know why green needed such a thing, but it's in the deck. And then the finisher or I win cards, I've got Revel in Riches, which has a win con built into it if I go to my upkeep with controlling 10 treasures. Hellkite Tyrant, a little more difficult, needs 20 artifacts, but if I make enough treasures, that can be achievable. And then Torment of Hailfire is just a good thing to dump a bunch of extra mana into to try and close the game out that way. Synergies and combos in the deck. So there are several. One of the big things of this deck that I like is there's a ton of synergy around the treasure theme. So I've got Aggravated Assault, which combos with Bear Umbra, Old Gnawbone, or potentially Reaver Cleaver to achieve infinite combat steps and or infinite mana alongside. Probably my favorite little combo synergy in the deck is Magda, Brazen Outlaw, Beladros Witherbloom, and or Bootlegger's Stash. So what I usually do here is I'll have Magda in play with 5 treasures. Wait until end step before my turn to sack the 5 treasures to Magda's tutor ability, grab a Bootlegger's Stash onto the battlefield, proceed to go into my turn and tap all my lands to make more treasures, activate Magda again to grab Beladros to the battlefield, activate his ability to untap all my lands, and then rinse and repeat, grab bomb threats like Old Gnawbone, Ancient Copper Dragon. So yeah, and Bootlegger's Stash kind of combos with several other things like Seedborn Muse, Bear Umbra. It also pairs well with Zorn or Jolene because each time tapping a land is a single instance of making a treasure. Also, obviously, Parallel Lives and Doubling Season. Chatterfang and Pitiless Plunderer, along with at least 2 Squirrel tokens and 1 available black mana is Infinite Treasures. And if you pair that along with things that ping when they see sacrifice or treasure creation, that's going to basically win the game that way. And then finally, we've got Ruthless Technomancer and Dockside Extortionist, along with any repeatable sack outlets, going to just generate infinite treasures. Or draw if Korvold's in play. So, yeah, those are the big combo synergy things. Ramp. There is a lot in the deck because that's what I'm doing is making treasures. I don't know what else to do. I've broken out the ramp pieces into kind of their own category, or 2 categories. We got treasures all in its one boat, and then kind of trad ramp, as I've called traditional ramp. The treasure generators are Ancient Copper Dragon, Atsushi the Blazing Sky, Dockside Extortionist, Cavern Hoard Dragon, Gala Greeters, Goldspan Dragon, Impulsive Pilferer, Pitiless Plunderer, Ragavan Nimble Pilferer, There and Back Again, Tireless Provisioner, and I've got a couple backup lands that make treasures in Mines of Moria and Treasure Vault. Ancient Copper Dragon's just potential for crazy treasures. It's a bit of a gamble, but can be good. Atsushi is just there for like great sack fodder. Great with Ruthless Technomancer or just sacking it to Korvold. Dockside is just really good. Cavern Horde Dragon is like Dockside with wings. If Korvold, if he were the Grinch, I must stop their treasures from coming. But how? Because it's kind of a hate piece for other artifact or treasure decks. So,
lucky me.
Hey, he might not show up. We'll see. Gala Greeters is a really good early play with a high ceiling over time for treasures made. Whenever creatures enters, I can make a tap treasure. And just really good with Korvold, because when Korvold enters, both of those triggered abilities go on the stack at the same time. I can resolve Gala Greeters first to have a tapped treasure to sacrifice when Korvold resolves. Goldspan Dragon, what's better than having a ton of treasures? Having each of those treasures tap for 2. And he's also good for targeting with some of my own spells, like Bear Umbra or Saw in Half, because he gives me a treasure whenever he's targeted. Impulsive Pilferer is just a really good early game chump blocker or sack fodder, and has great payoff with his Encore ability, because each of those tokens sacrificing themselves is a separate trigger for making treasures, which is relevant for things like Zorn and Jolene. Pitiless Plunderer is just whenever one of my creatures dies, I get a treasure. Ragavan is a good early game piece that can sometimes get under those slower control strategies. Otherwise, late game, he tends to be just sack fodder. There and back again. The first lore step is really not that relevant. I don't do really much at all with the Ring Tempts You. But the second one can tutor my Triome or a Shockland. And then the final step is giving me that Smaug token that when it dies, I make 14 treasure tokens. If I'm not running away with the game after that happens, something's gone horribly wrong, usually. Got Tireless Provisioner, which is going to make a treasure anytime I have a land enter the battlefield. Also has the option to make a food token if I'm in need of gaining life. And then the 2 lands are just a backup means of getting treasures. But Treasure Vault can be a little sneaky activation if I have something like Reckless Fireweaver or Mirkwood Bats in play. To a little surprise, hey, I make a bunch of treasures and here's a bunch of triggers. And then traditional ramp, I've got Entish Restoration, Harrow, Sakura Tribe Elder, Soul Ring, 3 Visits, and Ashnod's Altar. Some of which are more sacrifice triggers for Korvold. Card draw. So I don't have a ton of standalone card draw pieces because I am relying pretty heavily on Korvold to achieve that with me by sacking treasures. But I do have Deadly Dispute, Tevish Zot Doom of Fools, Treasure Map, and Vraska Golgari Queen. More sack outlets, and a Treasure Map is just a really good early game piece to make sure I'm scrying into lands if I need land drops, or keeping key pieces as I come across them. Multi-purpose. So I've got Binding the Old Gods, Black Market Connections, Blood Money, Fable of the Mirror Breaker, Grim Hireling, Seize the Spotlight, Spiteful Banditry, the Balrog of Moria, and Zayatora the Incinerator. Binding the Old Gods, I run this card in a lot of decks. I find it to be really good. It's removal and ramp. And then the last step that gives all my creatures Death Touch, really not relevant. So after it's achieved its second lore step, just a good thing to sacrifice to Korvold, if anything else. Black Market Connections is ramp draw, and it makes that Changeling token, or Shapeshifter token, that can be sack fodder, or somewhat relevant if Magda is in play, because she makes a treasure whenever she sees a dwarf get tapped. Blood Money is really good. With playing this, it's like the Grinch in the movie where he says, "Cheer up, dude! It's Christmas." Fable of the that was my thought when I came across it. Fable of the Mirror Breaker. I mean, card got banned in Standard for a reason. It's pretty. I mean, probably not quite as crazy in Commander, but. And when it does flip to the creature side, it does have to wait a whole turn before I can start making copies. So, Grim Hirelings kind of ramp and has that removal option built on it. Seize the Spotlight potentially is going to either provide me ramp and draw, or steals a creature temporarily to set up removal a la Sack Outlet. My only regret about this card is not throwing it in the deck sooner. The second I did, I played a game and it just did everything I wanted, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Spiteful Banditry is one of those new Lord of the Rings ones where just kind of it's a lot like Meat Hook Massacre but treasures instead. And then the Balrog of Moria is in here. I don't see myself ever hard casting the creature. I mean, maybe, but it's basically like a things like Big Score or
Unexpected Windfall.
That's it. Unexpected Windfall. Thank you, Beef. But the Balrog achieves something. It achieves something similar where instead of having to discard, I just cycle him and make 2 treasures. Yes, so very similar to that, but just on a creature instead, which is great because he's in the graveyard. You know, maybe I can recur him somehow and sack him to get his removal trigger. So, and then finally, Ziatora the Incinerator is. I really like this card because it's a sack outlet at my end step, and it's going to make 3 treasures when I do so, and provides a fling effect. So it can serve as removal, or sometimes Korvold just gets so big with all this treasure sacks that I can just sack Korvold and burn someone out. So could be fun. I don't think I've ever done that before. I've done it in Arena, but not in paper. So. Removal pieces. So I have Assassin's Trophies, just really good Golgari flexible removal. Bojuka Bog for some graveyard hate to try and slow some of those decks down. Besieju Who Endures, another flexible removal. Chatterfang Squirrel General is just crazy with treasures. He's going to make a squirrel token whenever he sees a treasure come on the battlefield. And I can sack squirrels with him to remove creatures. And Hellkite Tyrant is essentially, if I connect with it, it's going to steal all of my opponent's artifacts, or whichever opponent I hit. So effectively removal, and it has that built-in win con. Mayhem Devil is just ping, ping, ping. Tear Asunder, another flexible removal piece. I do have Meat Hook Massacre in here because it's basically Blood Artists with a board wipe built in. And then finally, a card that I personally really like is Unleash the Infernal. It's just Jund and generic. Deals 7 damage to a creature or planeswalker, and then removes an artifact or enchantment with mana value less than or equal to the excess damage. So, even if it's only 1 excess damage, that's a Soul Ring, or Burgeoning, or any artifact land. It's got plenty of targets, I think, over time. Or, or just a treasure. If someone has a treasure hanging out there, force them to get rid of it. Underrated Jund removal, in my opinion. Recursion. I've got 3 pieces. One of them can be used over and over again. So I've got Balaged Recovery. Ruthless Technomancer is the one that can recur more over time, where he's like, Disciple of Bolas. That's it. It's very similar to that, but makes treasures instead of draw. And then has an ability built on where I can pay 3 sack treasures equal to something's power in my graveyard and bring it back to the battlefield. So that's why with Dockside, it's crazy. And then I do have Skullwinder, which is just a good political recursion piece. I used to run Eternal Witness, but ever since I did the video with Beef with his Windgrace deck, I've been running Skullwinder over that instead in most of my decks, just because it's good.
It's a fun one. Plus,
yeah.
The Death Touch is relevant.
Yeah, that too. The Death Touch is very. Yep. So, and it's something I could saw in half too if I wanted to, get 2 more things out. So. Protection pieces. So Korvold is I think it's fair to say, a kill on sight commander. So I've got a few protection pieces to try and counteract that a little bit. Bear Umbra has that totem armor ability that stops him from dying to a board wipe. Heroic Intervention, hexproof and indestructible for a turn. Lightning Greaves, and then I used to run Tybalt's Trickery, but then really the only thing that was in there for was like a Psych Rift, so I swapped it out for a Red Elemental Blast instead. Yes, Tybalt's Trickery can hit more targets, but I think I'd rather just run it, go after what I'm after. Utility pieces. So among these, I've got Academy Manufactor, Ashnod's Altar, Crop Rotation, Field of the Dead, Phyrexian Tower, Saw in Half, Seedborn Muse, the Shire, Viscera Seer, Witch's Oven, and Yavimaya Cradle of Growth. Saw in Half. I literally just included this one today because I was actually watching a Nitpicking Nerds video and they were going over like the best cards of the year, and it came up at one point and it just clicked in my brain. Oh my god, Saw in Half makes tokens. And it's like it just clicked, and it's like the Jurassic Park quote of like,
I'm so concerned with whether or not you could that you never asked yourself whether you should.
Oh man, it's gonna go to a dark place. Yeah, I was trying to do the math in my head, like, okay, so if I have Parallel Lives and Doubling Season in play, and I Saw in Half Dockside, that's gonna be 4
This is
docks.
a episode. We're going to magical Christmas land. Here we go.
Yeah.
Let's do the count.
Through the Gumdrop Forest and oh man.
Gumdrop Forest of Parallel Lives and the candy cane buttons of Doubling Season.
Oh, Buddy the Elf. Yep.
Out the other side comes 12 little copies of Dockside Extortionist, and each Dockside Extortionist makes 34 billion treasures.
Have a nice basically. Merry Crisis. Mana base. I'm a little greedy on the lands here. I'm running a total of 32 lands. Well, 33 with MDFCs. Just because with the treasures, I think I'm gonna be okay on getting enough mana. Ziatora's Proving Ground is my Triome. Shock lands, the check lands, my turn 3 lands, running all of those. Then I do have some fetch lands because those are more sack triggers for Korvold and also help Tireless Provisioner with landfall. And I have 6 basic lands to grab with my ramp spells. So, piloting this monster. The early game is just a big race to generate as many treasures as I possibly can to set up for Korvold. Sequencing is everything in this deck. It is important to play things in the order that results in generating the most value. So, as an example of this, so when I have Korvold in play and I have a lot of treasures to sack, it's tempting to sack them all at once and throw all those triggers on the stack at the same time, but that allows my opponent to respond before any of those can resolve. So, it's better to sack one treasure at a time and let one Korvold trigger resolve one at a time and go and do that each time. So that way, I'm getting my mana and my card before opponents can, respond to all of them out on the stack at the same time. So, it's annoying, it's tedious, but it's the way to do it. And I think, if we're all at the table, I might say like, hey, just so the group knows, I'm going to be planning to sack all these treasures and resolving Korvold triggers one at a time. Do you guys have any responses in the middle of this? If not, I'm just going to go to draw my cards. So, and then when sacking treasures this way, I usually add mana in the order of green, black, and then red, and then repeat, because I have more green and black instants in the deck than red. So it's better to prioritize that mana first in case I draw into one of those things while I'm, digging for an answer. Weaknesses and challenges. There are some. There are definitely a decent amount. So for one, on a difficulty scale for piloting, I'd put this deck at, on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd put this deck at around 7. It has a tendency to take long turns, can become pretty tedious with all the different tokens, counters, sack triggers, and so on to keep track of. More often than not happening at the same time, so I got to choose which ones resolve first. I've caught myself several times not waiting to play a land until after I've cast Tireless Provisioner, or not waiting to crack a fetch land until I've played Korvold. So just sequencing. Korvold has a tendency to become arch enemy fairly quickly. He is a kill-on-site commander, like I said earlier. So therefore, I have to keep these things in mind when running the deck and roll with the punches. Just like punches from Beef's professional Facebreaker. Despite Despite this being one of my favorite decks to play, I do almost always ask at the table if they're okay with me running it. Just because I understand, the MTG community has a little bit of contempt toward how busted his design is. I mean, it is, if tomorrow they banned him, I would probably go, yeah, I get it. and find a different commander, because it's just, it can be so freaking just tough to respond to, I think, is the most frustrating thing. Matchups for me to watch out for are cards that prevent me from sacrificing things or stop triggers that rely on sacrifice. So Hushbringer, Yasharn, Angel of Jubilation, also cards that prevent me from using my treasures or drawing cards. So, Karn the Great Creator, Stony Silence, or Narset Parter of Veils, or Notion Thief. So, yeah, those are things that can really slow me down. So, but that is Korvold. That is the Dragon Horde. So, I'll hand it over to Beef.
Yeah, as you were talking about your deck, I was thinking about a lot of things. I was thinking about how we compared in the beginning, you being the Grinch to my Scrooge.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought about, okay, I see it. You're the big green meanie, and I'm the rich old white man. So that's the comparison. But
humbug.
I feel like I lived up to my Scrooge having a change of heart, and you're staying beginning Grinch the entire way through the game.
I'm committing to the bit, man.
There's it shouldn't surprise me that there are some overlap between our decks. We're both running treasures with black and red. So there are a number of cards that are the same between our two decks. So if you add green and subtract my desire to be kind to my opponents, then you get Korvold. That makes sense. Okay, but let's get into it. My deck, as I said, is built around Negan, the Cold-Blooded, and the name of the deck that I've named it is Negan Tough But Fair. Negan is he's a human legendary creature, human rogue. He costs two red, white, black, so he's a Mardu creature. And when he enters the battlefield, you and target opponent each secretly choose a creature that player controls. Then those choices are revealed, and that player sacrifices those creatures. Whenever an opponent sacrifices a creature, I create a treasure token. I'm going to run through that one more time because sometimes it confuses people. So when Negan enters, I choose an opponent. I'm not choosing creatures to start off. I'm choosing an opponent. Typically, I'm choosing an opponent who has at least two creatures because I want to guarantee the highest chance that not guarantee, but I want a chance that I'm going to get two treasures because we're both choosing a creature that player controls secretly.
Mind games.
I like to. It's a fun little mind game. You get to do multiple times. My little shorthand when I'm playing over webcam is I'll write down a name on a sticky pad and put it face down on the play mat and say, okay, well, you can just point at your creature now. I'm locked in. And that's kind of the fast way. If I'm in person, then it's a little more involved. You want each person have a little piece of paper or something so you can kind of go through that. It's the only thing that's a little sticky is trying to get through that interaction. But here's the pitch. We'll start with a Negan quote.
No one ever thinks that they're the evil one.
When The Walking Dead Secret Lair first dropped, there were a lot of people who were unhappy.
I hope you got your shitting pants on.
I was not one of them. On the contrary, I was stoked to build decks around characters from a comic book series that I loved and a show that consistently scratched the itch for a post-apocalypse zombie lore. In particular, Negan spoke to me as a commander, and no more so than when I saw his iconic bat, Lucille, immortalized as the bonus card. Equipment-centric decks have always been my favorite. I love having a diverse assortment of characters all equipped and swinging into combat and battling it out. Assembling some of the most obvious synergistic pieces or repeated sacrifice around Negan seemed pretty easy. But my initial build led to aggressive and oppressive board states, and while it ran cards that were efficient and effective, I found that it consistently resulted in unfun games. My friends who suffered as guinea pigs can attest that during the testing stages, they often just stopped casting creatures entirely because of the rate and efficiency of forced sacrifice triggers, and it left them with nothing, resulting in deeply unsatisfying games for all parties, myself included.
Not making a decision is a big decision.
I still really like playing equipment in these colors, and I knew I wanted to make the deck work and be fun without completely removing any agency from my opponents. So I started cutting the worst defenders out of the deck. Cards like Panharmonicon, that would have doubled my Negan ETB triggers. Conjurer's Closet, that was giving me a free flicker of Negan every single turn. Sheolder the Whispering One, that was both reanimating creatures and forcing my opponents to sacrifice in their upkeeps. And there's a lot more, whether that's Martyr's Bond, Dictate of Erebos, Grave Pact, Butcher of Malakir, Turgid, God of Fright, Helm of the Host. Doesn't matter. None of those would be in the final deck that I was trying to build. They're strong for certain, but I knew I wouldn't enjoy facing a deck like that myself, and I'm here to have fun with friends.
Your kid? He hid in one of my trucks and machine gunned a bunch of my men down, and I brought him home, safe and sound, and I fed him spaghetti.
And thus, we have a far more reactive and nimble build in its current, I never like to say final, form of Negan, tough but fair. So, to get into the build itself, I'm going to go over 5 key pieces that are essential to our full strategy. As I said, I didn't want to rely entirely on consistent, repeated, guaranteed instant speed sacrificing to get all my treasures. So I wanted to find some other ways to get the same effect that I was looking for without having to be quite as oppressive. So those pieces include Academy Manufactor, that says that every time I would make a treasure, or a clue, or a food, I get one of each instead. One that Tarren just mentioned in his deck list as well. My token doubler, the only version that I have in white, Anoint Procession. So for 3 and a white, if an effect would create 1 or more tokens under your control, it creates twice as many tokens instead. An iconic and important piece that was centric to building a Negan equipment deck, of course, has to be Lucille. The legendary artifact equipment for 1 and a black, equipped for 4. Equipped creature gets +2/+0 and menace, and whenever equipped creature attacks, defending player sacrifices a creature. If they do, you create a walker token, which is a 2/2 black zombie.
Lucille is thirsty. She is a vampire bat.
The Reaver Cleaver is also a worthy mention here as another equipment that is fantastic for creating lots of tokens, treasure tokens, quickly. There's a good reason we're both running that one. And finally, probably the piece that really ties the whole deck together is Sunforger. I realized this was perfect for a Sunforger deck. It was going to allow me to be much more light on my feet and reactive without sacrificing my equipment strategy. And it has 13 total options, which we'll make sure to be going over at different points during this video here. But let's just get into it. So the ramp, I'm running 11 pieces. Being a treasure deck, we have access to more mana, and sacrifice and effects in particular effectively double as rituals with the Negan deck. But these 11 consistently function as mana producers, and some of them also make treasures that further synergize with everything else. But let's just go through really quick. We've got Soul Ring, Wayfarer's Bauble, Arcane Signet, Talisman of Conviction, Talisman of Indulgence, Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff. Sword of Hearth and Home is great because it doubles as a flickerer, so I can flicker my Negan and get some extra sacrifices and treasures, plus it ramps me a land. Inspiring Statuary is a 3-mana mana rock that says you can tap it and artifacts you control to pay generic mana costs of non-artifact spells you cast, so I can save my treasures, but still use them to put mana towards other spells. And that's something that will be relevant as I get into my my endgame plan discussion here. Descent into Avernus. I think there's been a number of deck texts so far between yourself and myself, where I'm bringing up Descent into Avernus because it's just my new favorite toy.
Really, we just love that card.
Oh, it's just so fun.
fun.
And I love putting in a deck and knowing that I've got ways to break the parity. I've got ways to either blow up all their treasures in some decks. I've got ways so that when I'm making treasures, it's hurting you. And even the fact that you're getting the treasures first. You get to use those treasures on your turn. So they can do anything at instant speed, but if they don't have anything impactful to do at instant speed, then you're the one using that mana first. So you can win first with it. Forging the Tyrite Sword is an enchantment saga. There we go. The first two turns, it's just going to make a treasure, and on the last turn, it's going to get an equipment or the Sword God. And it's a 3 CMC, so I can recur it with some things that I'll mention later. Professional Facebreaker. For the most part, I'm just using it to make mana. Zorn makes an extra treasure every time you have a treasure trigger. And Grim Hireling as well. Has a similar effect to Professional Facebreaker, but he's making 2 every time it triggers. And he's fantastic. That if I can attack each of my opponents and get 6 treasures in a single turn, we're off to the races. Card draw. I'm running 11 pieces that are what I would consider card draw or card advantage. I do include some tutor effects here. They are putting cards in your hand. So, Phyrexian Arena, stable piece, smooths out draws. I added it recently, but I've been finding that it's doing exactly what I needed in that spot. Skull Clamp. It's an equipment. I've got little creatures that I can sacrifice. Easy card draw.
Had a hard time slotting that into Korvold. It would be good,
Makes
but
sense.
Do I need it with Korvold?
Yeah, probably not. Probably not. Not when you can sack a treasure for your card draw. That's it's already more efficient just to sack the treasure.
Yep.
Stinging Study is an instant for 4 and a black. It says draw cards and lose life equal to your commander's CMC. Negan is 5, so for 5 mana, lose 5, draw 5. That's an easy trade. Big Score is an instant speed, thus it's a Sunforger target to discard 1, draw 2, and it makes 2 treasures. Pure Steel Paladin is a creature that says you draw a card whenever an equipment ETBs, and then it makes equipping free if you control 3 or more artifacts.
Freaking love that card. It's so good.
Very doable. Oh, so much value in that. Oblation is technically removal, but I end up casting Oblation more often in situations I find where somebody's targeting an equipment that they're going to get rid of. Well, I'm just going to save it. I'll shuffle it away and draw 2 cards. Or trade a treasure for 2 cards. Easy choice. But in a pinch, I'm removing a game-winning piece from an opponent, so it's still useful there. And it's a great piece to grab with Sunforger. Fighter Class is an equipment tutor that, if you upgrade it, it makes equipping cheaper. Stoneforge Mystic is an equipment tutor. Imperial Recruiter is a creature tutor on ETB. Kelly and the Fae-Blooded is fantastic. It's got an adventure aura or equipment tutor on it, and then you can cast it from exile to be a creature that also synergizes with having artifacts and auras, or equipment and auras. So it's perfect for the deck. And then a personal favorite piece of mine that I've been trying to cram into decks for over a decade, and finally has a true perfect long-term home here, is a Stonehewer Giant. Big guy makes big plays. He's a vigilant giant. He has an ability for 1 and a white to tap and search for an equipment in your library and attach it to target creatures. So you can attack with it with vigilance. After it's already declared attacking, you can pay the mana, tap it, go get an equipment and throw it on something. Big wins.
Yep.
Big plays. Good. Great for grabbing a Sunforger because that's a lot of mana to save.
Oh, or Reaver Cleaver, you know?
Or Reaver Cleaver, absolutely, yeah.
It's Lucille, yeah, it's good.
Removal. Obviously, Negan is removal himself, but here's some purely removal pieces and some highlights, many of which synergize with Sacrifice, and they double as being rituals. A few that are just single target removal are Generous Gift and Chaos Warp. Great things that I can grab with my Sunforger. We run Demon's Disciple and Fleshbag Marauder. Both of these have the same ETB. Everyone sacks a creature. Priest of Forgotten Gods is a 2-mana creature. You can tap and sack 2 creatures. Then each opponent sacks 1 and loses 2 life, but you make 2 black mana and draw a card. Sometimes it's a little tricky to find 2 creatures to sacrifice, but boy, if you're making tokens, you can take a lot of advantage of that and consistently be getting ahead. Because, again, Negan's on the board. That's 3 treasures as well for, that effect. So it adds up. Eradicator Valkyrie has a similar effect, except it's a flying creature with a boast ability to sacrifice a creature, so it has to get in for combat damage first. Soul Shatter is an instant speed. It says each opponent sacks a creature or planeswalker with the highest CMC amongst what they control. Kaya's Guile is similar. It's got a sack effect for each opponent. Plus, it's got a couple other bonus abilities, and you can entwine if you want all the abilities. Gain 4 life, create a token, or exile a target player's graveyard. Good situational. Most of the time, I'm just grabbing it with a Sunforger to get an instant speed sacrifice on my opponents. Oh, and of course, another one to mention, Crackling Doom. Very similar to the previous 2, but it also deals 2 damage to each opponent. Each opponent sacks a creature with the greatest power among creatures they control. So great for getting the biggest, scariest threats off the board and out of my way, while also doubling as a ritual, because every single creature sacrificed is another treasure for me. Some recursion pieces. I mean, one of my favorites, Sevin's Reclamation. Fantastic in white. I run a couple fetch lands in the deck too, so it's even great for an early game ramp. But lots of small creatures, equipment that all fit into that 3 CMC or less range, and it's great for getting things back. Sword of Light and Shadow is an equipment piece, so I can get that out if I need to with a number of different effects. And it also lets me return creatures from my graveyard to my hand. So recursion, more card advantage that way. Also running Sun Titan, which is Bin's Reclamation on a giant. Getting 3 CMC things back on ETB or on the attack trigger. Some protection pieces. I've got 7 of them here, and they all happen to be great targets for Sunforger because they're all instants in red and white. So we'll go through those really quick here. Flicker of Fate is an instant speed flicker for 2 that says flicker a creature or enchantment for 2, so that's exiling and then returning to the battlefield. Ephemerate is very similar in that it's exiling a creature and then returning it to the battlefield. The added bonus with Ephemerate is that it's got a rebound, so it's going to cast itself again from exile on your next upkeep. So you can get a double flicker out of it. The Flicker of Fate and the Ephemerate kind of are great because we want to keep Negan alive. And I'll get into that just briefly in the piloting portion here. But for me to get treasures out of my sacrifice effects, Negan's got to be on the board. So when somebody targets Negan, it's not usually the end of the world because recasting Negan means more treasures too. But being able to save him, and their removal whiffs, and I'm removing their creatures with the Negan. Very good, powerful moments there.
Here's a little refresher on who the hell I am. I wear a leather jacket, I have Lucille, and my nutsack is made of steel. I am not dying until I am damn good and ready.
A couple more protection pieces. The obvious Teferi's Protection needs no introduction. Clever Concealment is another phasing card. And it's also got Convoke. So you can potentially cast it for free as long as you have 4 creatures to tap down. But it lets you phase out any number of permanents in white. Fantastic. Another kind of backup to Teferi's Protection, basically. Akroma's Will is a protection piece in a pinch, but more often and more typically, it's a game winner. It's great for just turning your board into a protection from just about everything, flying, double, strike, lifelink, danger zone.
I'm in danger.
And then, of course, the last 2 that are great for catching a blue deck off guard, it's a Tybalt's Trickery and a Lapse of Certainty, which is also a counter spell, except it says counter target spell. If that spell is countered this way, put it on top of its owner's library instead of into that player's graveyard.
White counterspell. Huh.
It's
interesting.
Nobody expects a red or a white counterspell. And when you've got a Sunforger, I mean, you're set up. It's the best possible scenario for running a couple counterspells like that.
For sure. Yep.
Some utility pieces. The first two I'm going to mention here, I think really epitomize my tough but fair approach. Those two are going to be Combat Calligrapher. Combat Calligrapher is a bird cleric. It's a 3/3 for 3 and 1 white. With flying, it says Inklings can't attack you or planeswalkers you control. And whenever a player attacks one of your opponents, that attacking player creates a tapped 2/1 white and black Inkling creature token with flying that's attacking that opponent.
I see what you're doing there.
So it's directing my opponents to attack each other and not attack me. So that's a win. But more importantly, it's giving them a chance to get a token from me to sacrifice to my forced sack requests. So they're keeping stuff on the board that I can make them sacrifice for future treasures, and they're fighting with each other. It's a win-win. It's a fantastic card, and it's hard to pass up on. I mean, getting a free flying creature, that's not nothing. And if you get a couple turns of doing that, you can get a good pile going. And sure, they might eventually turn around and come back at me if they get rid of my Calligrapher and the little clause says that Inklings, can't attack me and he is gone. But it does a lot of work in the meantime. The other piece that's also very similar is Master of Ceremonies. All of these are wins for us, but again, they're giving my opponents a little bit of chance to engage. It's not entirely one-sided. I'm giving them some
You're incentivizing them.
Yes, I'm giving them a chance to partake in the party. Much like a Descent into Avernus allows them to partake in the party, this allows them to take in the party as well. Master of Ceremony says at the beginning of your upkeep, each opponent chooses amongst money, friends, or secrets. For each player who chooses money, you and that player create a treasure token. Synergy. For each player who chooses friends, you and that player create a 1/1 white, green and white citizen creature token. Perfect. Stuff for them to sacrifice, stuff for me to sacrifice. And for each player who chooses secrets, you and that player each draw a card. That's just fine.
It's like everything you want to do, basically.
Everything you want, yes. And that's every single one of my turns. I start with that, so that's a good time. A couple other pieces that also fit into the utility section. Loyal Apprentice. Makes a token at the beginning of combat if you control your commander. Great for sack fodder. And the token's also a flyer with haste, so gonna make a lot of value. Treasure Map. Scry it with it 3 times, and then it makes 3 treasures and becomes a land that lets you sack treasures for card draw. So that's going to be value for the rest of the game, because I'm going to have treasures the whole time. Delina Wild Mage, the fair version of Helm of the Host, I think is how I'll describe it. Makes extra Negans, really, is what it boils down to, is very often just making extra Negans. But I've got other creatures in the deck that have ETB effects, and I can get a lot of value by getting free copies of things. Getting a free copy of my Imperial Recruiter or of Stoneforge Mystic. Those are also great value moments to suddenly get a tutor up an equipment or tutor up a creature, just because I attacked with Delina. Halvar, God of Battle, lets you move an equipment around at the beginning of combat. Nice, convenient, useful. Also gives all your equipped creatures double strike when he's on the board. Super powerful. Arden, Intrepid Archaeologist. Beginning of combat, you can attach any number of equipment or auras you control to target creature. This isn't truly a Voltron deck. I'm not trying to load up Negan with a lot of equipment and attack him with just him. But sometimes that's all it takes to finish a game off. So
commander damage is commander damage, man.
Yep, that's the truth.
Yep.
Let's do some mana base here. I'm running 31 lands, one of which is an MDFC. I'm running a little low on lands, but again, same reason as Tarren. It's treasures. I don't have to worry about lands nearly as much because I've got the juice, like corn. So in the deck, I'm running 4 of each basic. I'm running an assortment of duels, fetches, a triome, the MDFC lands, where it's lands on both sides. Also running a Bajuka Bog and Treasure Vault. Synergies and combos. We'll go through these real quick here. So first, a couple of mid-range, kind of mid-game pieces that put the treasures to extra use. We have a Mayhem Devil, as Tarren mentioned, same reason. Whenever a player sacrifices a permanent, Mayhem Devil deals 1 damage to any target. Well, I'm sacking a lot of treasures and making my opponent sack a lot of creatures, so that's damage going around all over.
That's gonna be insane if we both
it's
have
gonna
that
be
card
gross.
in play.
If
It's
either
just,
of us get a Mayhem Devil, it's gonna be a problem.
God. It's gonna be ridiculous.
And I don't know if you mentioned this on yours. I think you might have mentioned it. I'm also running Mirkwood Bats, which is
so
what I
good.
consider Negan's other bat. Is Mirkwood Bats.
That's really clever.
Which says that whenever you create or sacrifice a token, each opponent loses 1 life. Well, I create and sacrifice a lot of treasures in this deck, so I can do some big damage with those 2. Next, we got a couple of relevant pump effects that synergize with everything we do. We've got one that's an aura and enchantment. It's the only aura that I run in the deck, but it's synergistic enough that it's worth running. And that's All That Glitters. Enchant creature. Creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment you control. It's going to be a big number. 2 that are also very similar include Cranial Plating, which is an equipment for 2 that says equip for 1, or you can attach at instant speed for black. And that sometimes also can be relevant with a pile of treasures where you've got lots of mana to be able to suddenly have a blocker that's way bigger than people are planning for.
Yep. Also combos with Marionette Master too, right? If you equip that, yeah. Or you're getting there.
We're getting there. I'm
sorry,
on my
didn't mean
synergies
to steal your
combos
thunder.
section here, Tarren. Let me finish the thought. Equipped creature gets +1/+0 for each artifact you control with Cranial Plating. I'm also running, finally, in this section, Nettle Cyst, which is a 3-mana living weapon. It ETBs with a 0/0 germ creature token equipped with the weapon. It has equipped 2. And it says equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact or enchantment you control. So the reason we're running those 3 are the last 2. The final creatures that put the pump effects to good use. The first one being Spike Shot Elder. Easy to miss. It's a 1/1 Goblin Shaman. But he has an ability. It says 1 red. Spike Shot Elder deals damage equal to its power to target creature or player.
Oh.
So if I've got 25, 30 treasures and 25, 30 clues and foods as well, and I throw a Cranial Plating on there, I just start spending the treasure to finish off a couple players, and it can do the work, no problem. But, of course, you spoiled it. But yes, Marionette Master is very good with the Cranial Plating, Nettle Sister, and All That Glitters. Makes him very big, and now all the treasures are going to do so much more damage with Marionette Master. Quick rundown. He has an ETB ability of Fabricate 3. He's a 1/3 human artificer. Fabricate 3 says that when you enter, you either make 3 1/1 servo tokens or put 3 counters on Marionette Master. And whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, target opponent loses life equal to Marionette Master's power. So give him a big pump, and then sack a few treasures for the win. As far as piloting, it's really straightforward with this deck, I think. You're ramping, you're going to cast some spells, get some creatures on the board, equip them with things, find value, and accrue a pile of treasures. It's equipment-centric. It's not really a Voltron deck. It takes a village, and Negan knows how to delegate. So just keep Negan alive and on board so that your sacrifices can generate treasure tokens. As far as weaknesses and challenges, I just wrote down my Bleeding Heart, because if I didn't want to keep my friends, this deck would be so much meaner, and I'm so glad that I'm not that person. It could be worse. It has been worse. Many friends will attest that they did not love being the guinea pigs during the testing portion of this deck creation. But I think that the deck has come a long way. It's very fun. It's competitive without being completely oppressive. Fingers crossed. We're going to find out. We're going to watch the video. You're going to see it. So, we'll find out if it's terrible or evil. Or
tune in to see
or maybe
more.
it's fun. So, if you would like to take a closer look at the decks we showcased today, follow the Moxfield links in the description below. Stay tuned for some live streamed gameplay of these decks in the near future and an eventual edit of at least one of those games.
Once again, click on that like button and comment below just how much shame the two of us should have for presenting you these filthy treasure decks right before Christmas. And if you'd like to see this channel grow and thrive, please consider joining our Patreon.
Have a Korvold Christmas and a Negan New Year.